Greetings. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for this important session. I just have a few announcements before we get started. First, we ask you to please turn off your cameras and mute your audio during the presentation. There may be some time at the end of the presentation when we invite you to join us on screen and with audio for questions and answers, but we'll let you know when and if that happens. Also, as was posted on the welcome slide, please use the chat to say hello, to share any ideas or resources that you might have, submit questions to the speakers. Remember, these are Zoom meetings, and we've asked attendees to stay off screen. So the chat is really the only way to communicate. So it's my pleasure this morning to introduce one of our first sessions. What if every teacher works skillfully with English language learners? Our presenters today are Lorene Avery, Jason Cervone, Andrea Mercado, and Diana Salazar. They are from the UCLA XL Leadership Academy. The Leadership Academy provides personalized, collaborative, purposeful professional development for all educators working with English language learners. In this session, you will be able to discuss with the teachers some of their experiences as XL site facilitators, as well as their own personal learning journeys with XL. So it's my pleasure at this point in time to turn things over to our presenters, and I hope you enjoy the session this morning. Thank you. Jason.
Thank you, George. Good morning, everyone. We're happy to be here. I'm just going to kind of start off our presentation by walking you through the core of what Excel is and how it's grown. I won't go too much into it because I find that the more we try to explain this, the more confusing it seems to get. So it's much better to let our Andrea and Diana, who are participating as site facilitators, kind of tell you what they do every day. So to start off, Excel, it's a grant-funded project, the National Professional Development Program from the Office of English Language Acquisition. This is our third time with this grant, so we have been developing this program over many years, and we think we've really narrowed it down to find out what really works for teachers in the classroom. So Excel stands for Excellence for English Learners. And again, this program is focused on all teachers, as in, whatever classroom subject area you teach. We know that everyone either has English learners in their classroom, or if you don't, you will soon. And that is obviously not to say that, the ESL bilingual specialists are not a focus. In fact, most of our site facilitators and peer mentors are, these teachers with that background in language working with their peers in, for lack of a better word, the mainstream classroom. We obviously don't really like the term. Okay, next slide, please. So again, what if every teacher is prepared to work with English learners? That is, again, the main focus of Excel. And also, what if teachers had ownership over their own professional development? We are very much not in a place where, Lorene and I, as Orini, she goes, are not, we're with UCLA, but this isn't, the outside expert coming in, teaching a class. This is, classroom embedded, teacher-led, teacher-driven professional learning, professional development. So just a little overview for today. We're going to introduce Excel as professional learning for all educators and review opportunities that we can provide for your participation. We've got educators who will share their experience, both here live and also through a short video that we've put together with one of our partners. And you'll have time to ask questions and hopefully explore ways that you could do this in your own school. And so our current grant, we call Excel 2026 because we ran out of names, and so we're just going by when it ends. It's focused on rural remote schools in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. But if you're not in that area, we're not bound by that. All of our current schools are in Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York. So this is, I mean, geographically, no boundaries, but our main, we'd really like to focus right now is getting into schools that really lack the language supports where, you know, if you as an ESL bilingual teacher could be the only person, you know, in the school in the district working with an entire population. Recruiting is set to begin for January, but again, this is a 5-year program. So if this is something you're interested in, you don't have to start in January. You don't have to start this year. This is something that we can talk further about and really make this best for you. And so I'm going to let us get into our first video. This is actual teachers who have been doing the work with us over the years and sharing their experiences. And so we can go ahead and play that.
When you've got a student who's starting kindergarten and they're not speaking the language and they're at a much different conversational level than a student who has been speaking the language for a long time, it can be a little scary for a teacher.
Teachers don't always realize their academic language that they're using isn't always at the level that the child actually needs.
Some of my students that kind of present or look like they know exactly what's going on, they really lack some of the underlying vocabulary that would really boost their skills.
By the time they reached classes of my own in upper high school, it was generally assumed that you as a learner have had your needs served one way or another by this point.
The population is growing in Rhode Island, so I think it's really important for teachers to know more about these students and how we can best service these students, and ultimately best service all of our students.
There's a predictable structure of each credential, kind of analyzing, engaging in professional learning, developing a plan of how you're going to transfer this learning into your own classroom, implementing the plan, and then reflection.
If you have some background, there's something there for you. If you have very little background on the topic, there's definitely some beginning pieces that allow you to develop, you know, your ability to really be reflective of your practice. And that reflection piece has been extremely valuable for me in terms of how I do things differently at times or how I will be doing things differently next year.
In a profession like teaching, you are doing so much creation. There's often very little time to process. What I appreciate about these micro-credentials is it gives that pause for you to think and reflect on what you're doing every day in the classroom, and then implement it immediately after.
I just finished language acquisition one, which was the one that I was saying that really made me stop and think about how I'm using language and the directions that I'm giving. Am I getting too wordy? Am I talking too much?
The second language acquisition gave me a really good background as to where students are on the spectrum of acquiring English as a second language, and as well as giving them the tools that can help them along the way. Reinforcing vocabulary, using graphic organizers, using different tools in the classroom so that they can access the content, never watering down what we're doing, but just making it so that they can access what we're learning in class.
I used what I learned throughout the micro-credential in the classroom with the kids. They were making a binder where they would, any new word they were introduced to, we would define it based on what Google said. We would define it then in our own words so that we can remember it better. And then we would find a picture that goes with our definition so that the picture can pop in our head whenever the word comes up to help lead us to that. And that was something that I learned through the micro-credential as a way to reach ELs, but I found that it also reaches my special ed population as well.
And the students really enjoyed it. They told me that, you know, both of these tools were helpful to them because they could use them in their assessment while also showing me what they know. Not only that they understand the vocabulary, but they understand its place in the content and how it connects to everything.
There's been so much support through this program that anytime I have a question, I can reach out. My questions are answered. I have a great network of teachers that are working on it here, so that's been like super beneficial. Yeah, anytime I have a question, I get an answer within 24 hours.
Anytime that one of us might have a question, we could generally solve it amongst ourselves. And if we couldn't, we could bring it to our Director of Learning and Teaching. And if that question needed further clarification, Excel has been extremely responsive and helpful in clarifying.
We as a cohort are meeting like every month in order to ensure there's accountability to push our learning, right? So oftentimes we'll rely on each other to talk about the artifacts we've been collecting, to talk about the things we've learned from our resources.
With my job, there's a lot of paperwork with being a special educator, IEP meetings. There's so much that goes into it that I do like being able to move at my own pace, and when I have time, I can jump in and do it, and it's very easy to work around my schedule.
I'm really excited for what will kind of continue to come in the future. My goal has been to make it through the first set of 6 micro-credentials this year, and then in the next year we'll move on to kind of the second set of 6, hopefully.
It aids me in my planning, it aids me in my classroom, and I feel like all of the micro-credentials were things that I could use. It was an added experience so that it helped me prepare my lessons better, and I got immediately feedback from my students.
Actually, it's been a lot of fun for me as an educator to try out a lot of the strategies, because this program not only has me focusing on one area at a time, it also gives me a whole toolbox of things to try, like strategies and places to look for lesson plan ideas and how can I tap into the needs of my students.
It's really made me realize, like, wow, I thought I was simplifying directions. I wasn't. As I was reading through it, I was like, man, like, it really made me reflect on myself and realize that I can use this even with my students, because they struggle with some of the same communication pieces, language pieces. There's that learning barrier that they have as well. So it's actually been super useful in terms of my own everyday job as well.
It's a platform that allows for collaboration and community among educators, and there's freedom, in a sense, and flexibility in how you conduct the learning. You know, we schedule our own meetings and times for what work for us.
And you're doing that not in a silo, which I think oftentimes is the downfall of teaching, right? You're always teaching alone, you are always in your own classroom. Excel expands that a little bit, and I'm working with teachers that are not in the same department as me, who are not in the same grade levels as me. And to be able to do that in a small cohort feels like the support I wish all schools had.
So within the school community and the teachers, I feel like now we're developing a working group where we know that this is an interest that we share and that we have our students' best interests at heart. And it's an opportunity to really foster collaboration and to I just feel like it's the very beginning of something that's really powerful.
It's exciting as an educator, I think, to engage in professional learning with your colleagues and then test it out and try it in the moment and see the connections and the impact that it has on the students.
It allows students to really know that they matter, and that this, regardless of what language they speak, that they can achieve their dreams.
As teachers, we need to do what's best for our students, and as teachers, we're inclined to want to provide resources and scaffolds that help every student. Not every class is the same, not every student is the same. So I just view it as another way that we can differentiate and scaffold for all students.
They have the ability to tackle problems from different angles, different perspectives, and also have the empathy and the value and of a multicultural world.
The way I see it is students are architects of their future, right? And what we build them up to do in our schools is to give them the tools they need so that they can build the futures that they want. And in many ways, our education systems aren't set up for them to do that sometimes, right? So when I thought about Excel, when I think about supports for MLL students, we're giving them ways to sort of restructure things that work for them, right? In a society that often does not think of MLLs at the center, but rather at the periphery, at the margins, I think it's important for Excel to do the work of recentering students, because the work that we do for them is actually beneficial for everyone in that ecosystem.
I was able to take what I had learned, apply it in the classroom, and see how it affected my students. And what I noticed almost across the board was that it not only helped my students who were multi-language learners, but I was also seeing feedback that the skills that I was learning in this program were also helping my native speakers.
The population of diversity and multi-language learners is growing in the state, so it's projected that we will have more students that would explicitly benefit from these supports. However, it is helpful for all students. What works for one student probably is going to work for another student. So if you're modifying something for a multi-language learner, other learners would also benefit from that scaffold.
I would already recommend it to other school districts. Yes, 100%. For myself, as even an 11th and 12th grade teacher of English literature and composition, the perspective and skills and strategies that I'm practicing and learning more about and applying and reflecting on, they benefit all my students.
There's an expression about windows and mirrors, and how students often in places maybe like Barrington, they're looking at a mirror when they're looking at the content. They're reading books in class. They're seeing themselves in the characters, in the scientists, in the other people in their room. But we need to provide more windows for students. If we provide more windows, that's a window into another culture. They're able to view and learn about different cultures that maybe they don't know about, to be more globally responsive citizens, both in school and beyond Barrington High School.
And that inclusivity really allows for all students, to see that value and be able to have their voices heard. And I think through that process, it adds richness to not only for that student, but really to the entire community that student lives in.
I'd like to think that social change comes in these small networks, right? The most change often comes from localized efforts, because that's where you have the most context. You know your students, you know your people. So my hope is that we as a cohort are able to implement this change within our own classrooms and have that spread out, right, towards our communities, towards our cities, and from there to expand out nationwide. Because at the end of the day, all students need the types of support that Excel is sort of guiding us through.
You may be aware or may not be aware that some of the teachers here have joined a team of teachers here to develop themselves professionally to better serve the students who are from multi-language families. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
What do you think of that idea?
That's great. Wait a minute, that's fantastic, because I had no idea. As a Hispanic individual who grew up speaking one language to then having to switch, not too many schools are sensitive about that. They're like, well, this is our curriculum, figure it out. Whereas here it's like, this is our curriculum, but we're gonna help you figure it out. And hearing that, that's, wow.
Thank you. Can we get the PowerPoint going again? Thank you. So we talked the video talked a little about the micro credentials, which Rini will explain in more detail in the next section. It's basically a platform to kind of focus and your professional learning efforts. So my last piece before moving on is the core of the Excel effort is these professional learning teams. I think over the years, over the many programs we've done, nothing seems to be as effective as just giving educators the time to, sit down and talk about their students, talk about their needs. So our Excel teams, as we call them, they're school-based professional learning teams led by, they're usually led by an ESL specialist or bilingual, but it could be anybody at the school who wants to take on this role. So team leaders are part of a larger peer network to kind of guide their learning to bring back to their school. And this larger network gives leaders the chance to work with facilitators from other schools and other teachers who are going through this process. So this is all purely led and driven by people who are doing this work. Our current teams are in New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, and we've already got some ready to go in Vermont and New Hampshire. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Rini.
Thank you. Apologies. I was unable to unmute myself. I'm just going to give you a little bit more background on the micro-credential piece of this, and then give you an opportunity to actually hear from Diana, who you saw in the video in Barrington, and Andrea Mercado, who's also a participant and site facilitator in Maine. So just to tell you what these micro-credential things mean, because it's one of those terms that means many different things to many different people. We use the micro-credentials as a way to scaffold the learning of the teachers that are involved. And we have developed them over a number of years and aligned all the micro-credentials with the core competencies that teachers need to work with multilingual learners, English language learners, variety of different terminology that's used. And you can see the list of the first 6 on the right-hand side there. These also align with the standards put forth by TESOL and NABE and many states. We've looked at not every state, but the standards in the states we're working at. We think that the core competencies are that teachers understand the what we call professionalism, the elements, the cultural and social elements of working with English learners in a public school. They need to understand second language acquisition, instructional strategies and assessment that are effective and equitable with English learners, how to support and promote student voice among English learners, and how to, what school culture, what a quality school culture and family engagement looks like that really reaches all of the students in the school. Participants, everyone in the program, the micro-credentials are all competency-based. I know that you all know what that means, but all of this work is done through implementing things in your classrooms with your students, not about lectures or reading or sort of sit and get professional development. This is learning by doing. And because of that, it aligns and complements very nicely other professional development that's going on. Many of our districts are, are in a multi-year cycle of SIOP training or some other more lecture-based or reading-based training. And this doesn't replace that or eliminate the need for it, but it focuses on that implementation piece. That's so important. Here you can see the full set of 12 micro-credentials. This work, there's really almost 2 different pathways you could take depending on where you are when you start. We encourage and believe every teacher, every classroom teacher, every specialist teacher, many paraprofessionals should really work towards and earn what we call the essential support micro endorsement. That's those 6 core competencies that we just talked about. But there is a second piece for teachers who may want to become ESL specialists. That's not required, and it's not a pathway for everyone, but you can do this through micro-credentials as well as having the opportunity. I'll give you an example. The working with newcomers is in the specialist pathway, but I know from conversations we've been having with teams that are forming in Vermont, for example, many teachers might want to actually start there because of the pressures right now. I don't have to tell folks, there's a large influx of newcomers, large Afghani population settling in Vermont, and teachers may want to start there. And that's fine, wherever it works for folks. So I'm going to excuse myself, I'm coughing, and invite Andrea to introduce herself and talk to you about her experiences in a few. So Andrea.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the introduction, Laureen. I'm Andrea Mercado, and I am located in Maine. I work with the Lewiston Public School System, and for about a year-ish, I've been a site facilitator here. So I do want to give you a little background on my journey with English learners and then how I stumbled upon the Excel Leadership Academy. So I am a former English learner. My parents are Colombian and they migrated here. So I went to school my whole life in the US, but I'm a bilingual learner. So I remember when I was in school, I did very well because my parents really pushed it and everything. But I remember when English learners would come or there were English learners in the classroom, I still remember a time when they were put in special ed programming. And I grew up in the Northeast, so we're pretty progressive. But that really often sets a context for me to see how long we've come and how long a lot of districts still have to go. And I'll say that as a precursor to my experience here in my current district. So I went to school to be a teacher, but I've always worked with English learners. My first teaching job was in South Florida in the greater Fort Lauderdale, and it was a small community school where all the students were of Haitian background. So some of them were refugees. A lot of the parents were illiterate. They were very, very poor and working class. And even then, when I started my career, they really weren't. They had the label of English learners for federal purposes, but there was no real training around that. I think I got the position because of who I am and I understood cultural differences and so on. But I remember just learning a lot being on the job, right? And then suddenly I stumbled into a master's program at Florida International University. So I don't know if you know this, but Miami had one of the first bilingual programs in the nation because of the large Cuban immigration settlement that was there from the 1950s and 60s. So they actually really bought into this idea of multilingualism. In any case, the university is in Miami, so they started a master's program for teachers or for TESOL. Actually, that's what the program was called, Foreign Language Education in TESOL. And when I enrolled in that, I got the opportunity to come and teach in New York City. So New York City is very used to receiving these populations and working with them. So I learned so much there. I worked as a full-time ESL teacher for the primary grades, and then I worked as a bilingual teacher for newcomers in middle school. So it was a very small newcomer school, and we just worked with newcomers, students that entered the country 2 years or sooner. And I learned so much through those experiences. So I was very well equipped to work with these learners because of a variety of contexts. And I've also worked with students from many different backgrounds, whether it be linguistic, whether it be cultural, or whether it be socioeconomic. So all of these intersections are really, really important to understand when working with these populations. So I found a position up here in Maine to work with the University of Maine to do a little bit of research around them. And the reason I mentioned that is because I took a little time away from teaching to work as a graduate assistant, but I would also consult with small rural school districts. Now, mind you, most of my experience was either suburban or urban. So when I came to Maine, this really rounded out my experience as a teacher to work with rural schools. And I'd never done that. I'd never even seen them. And so when I would go out and consult with these schools who had a very low incidence of English learners, it really opened my eyes to say, oh, not everybody knows how to work with these students or their families. Because I think a lot of the times we talk about working with the students, but I'm like, no. What you're forgetting, what's different about English learners is that they are really influenced by a context. And often the context is the family and the community. So most of the multilingual learners that we work with are really embedded within a context of family and community. So it's not just working with the learner. You really have to integrate yourself into that ecosystem. And I think a lot of professional development and a lot of conversation around working with English learners kind of misses that. But in any case, what's good about rural communities is that they're a little bit more about that orientation because of how small they are. But within these small, low incident rural districts that I would work in, I would often be so frustrated because I was like, I'm the only one that really understands what I'm trying to explain to people in terms of what these students are going to be needing. And there were so little resources and so few people in the school that kind of even knew where to start to working with these students, that it was frustrating for everybody because whoever was working with the student didn't really understand how they could help. And then for me, knowing what was needed but not being able to grasp it was also very frustrating. But most of all, what I learned there from talking to a lot of teachers and administrators was how isolating the experience of being a teacher for English learners can be. Kind of like I would often talk to foreign language teachers, and they had a very similar experience. But when it comes to difference, and if you live in an area that's like a predominant culture, so Maine is a predominantly white state. That was a new one for me too. I'd never lived in a place like that, but there are so many additional barriers within the school system to really allowing an accessible and equitable experience for multilingual, multiracial, multicultural students. So isolation is a really, really huge piece when I went around to different districts and talked to whoever was working with these students. And for the students, I mean, you got to think about it, right? So these low incidence communities really, really needed help and support. And I was only one person. This whole field of English learners was just starting to emerge in the state of Maine as something that kind of needed more attention because they were getting more students who were multilingual learners. And I'm not saying that now we have a huge population, but we have enough where the state is paying attention. And so I went to a conference and I saw a presentation by Excel and I said, you know what, this is exactly what we've been looking for. I also work with the local TESOL regional organization, and I that's where they present it. And I said, you know what, this is perfect for the northern New England region, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, where there are pockets of these English learners that really need support, and it's like prime time for us to come in and try something new. Because as the presentation before me kind of mentioned, the old form of professional development really is not going to serve the needs of students or teachers, because I mean, we are in a very innovative point of education where we have an opportunity to kind of try new things and do things differently after the pandemic. And what we do not want to do is go back to old forms of learning, or old mindsets, I would say. And I think the Excel Leadership Academy really maximizes a lot of what was said in the video. I was like, check, check, check. I absolutely agree with that. This whole collaborative model for learning, and for looking at learning as a professional learning experience, not like this development model. I do appreciate the change in language, because what we really want to focus on is the fact that most teachers are on a spectrum of needs and experiences, right? So we have new teachers, we have teachers mid-career, we have veteran teachers. I consider myself a veteran teacher. And what I did want to kind of highlight was, after watching the videos, I loved a lot of what was being said, but the last speaker kind of spoke to this idea of systems not being set up for success for students. And I think that was really important. And what I wanted to say was that, for me, having been in this field for so long, and having lived experience where this is all I know, my challenge is that I don't understand people who don't know this. And so for me, because I'm a site coordinator, I know a little bit more. I've studied this. Like, this is my entire world, the world of being a multilingual and multicultural. I do not understand what it's like to not be that. And so for me, this whole experience has been very enlightening and very helpful, because I need to understand my colleagues a whole lot better. And so by working in these collaborative groups, by sitting with them and saying, you know, here's what you're already doing. You're doing well. Now highlight that and add this to it. It really offers this model where I'm understanding where they're coming from, and they can better understand how somebody like me, who's really been in this field, thinks and functions, and then they can start to take on a lot of those skills and mindsets. And so it's like this recursive process. But I think that that's an important piece, because if I've been in this world for so long, I sit in so many meetings where I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, how can you not see what I see? But I'm taking for granted that these people have really had the same experiences that I have, and they haven't. And so I have learned a lot of compassion and empathy for my colleagues who don't understand a lot of the things that I understand. And that's necessary. That's necessary for me, but it's also necessary for them to see that there are other ways to see the world. And so that's one of the greatest reasons that I really appreciate working in this network. So I can tell you a lot about like what we do in the classroom, but I really have come to believe that professional development is personal development. It's personal learning, because it's all coming to us at a point where we're going to relate to it. And so what's really personal about this process is, just like the video mentioned, you do it at your own pace. You're being very reflective about what you're doing, but you're taking those skills and implementing them. And that's how adults actually learn. Adults learn best when they're taking something, when they have a need and they're filling it, they're using problem solving, and they're developing skills that they can immediately apply. And that's how it's going to stick. That's how students should be learning as well. But most of all, what I really appreciate about this whole process, because that's what the Excel Leadership Academy is, it's a collaborative process for us to shift our professional learning in a way that's truly applicable, that we can really use to help access learning for all students. And like a lot of the teachers in the video said, these are just skills that are very important for most students. But what I always emphasize is that when it comes to multilingual learners, the cultural piece is the most important. And there are components of this whole process where we're talking about how does culture and language make this whole process of working with English learners different. And it is. And it's very complex, and it's very integral to the process. But if you miss that, then we're creating a whole other set of problems. But I think that that's where the collaborative teams come in, where we just really have good dialogues. We have these difficult conversations that are necessary. And it's not just professional development in terms of academic skills. It's really talking about how do we work with whole human beings that are embedded in whole families and whole communities. And that's what I believe is missing in a lot of professional development. So these are the opportunities that you would have if you were to be part of a collaborative group like this, where it's really looking at a holistic perspective in instruction and teaching and just the whole process of working with English learners. Laureen?
Thank you so much, Andrea. I love the personal development and the just being explicit about our focus on together, on whole students, families, and communities. Yeah. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn things over to Diana. Diana, also a site facilitator and participant. My personal belief is that Diana is going to be the first person to earn the Rhode Island MLL endorsement, which we hope to see in other states. But Diana is, she'll tell you this, but she is not an ESL specialist. So a little different background as a site facilitator. So go ahead, Diana.
So welcome everyone. Again, my name is Diana Shields. I work in one of the greatest districts in Rhode Island. I've been teaching at Barrington High School for 24 years. And in those 24 years, the level of support and the level of care and the level of real commitment to student learning has always been high. And so it's the way that I started with Excel really was, I stumbled, like Andrea, I stumbled onto it. I was ready for something new. I wanted to learn more about multilingual strategies, to use in my classroom. Barrington High School is a community that does not have a high frequency of multilingual learners and initially, and now it's growing. And so these were skills that I think were important. So it started with me. I've done lots of schooling. I have a PhD in education. I am the science department chair. My background is very much in science. This program and the skills that it develops for us is one that I think for me, again, is personal. I came into the United States at the age of 11. I did not speak English. And so a lot of what Andrea was talking about, I experienced firsthand. Initially, I had, I was actually, my first year in the United States, I was in probably 3 or 4 different grade levels because I didn't have the paperwork to indicate what grade level I was in. And so a lot of the work that we do here is personal. And I feel so blessed and so fortunate to be able to bring it to my district. Right now, there are 7 members, 5 high school science teachers. So it's really fun to be part of that department where we are really learning together. We have 1 high school special education teacher and 1 middle school teacher who are working on micro-credentials. As Rini said, I am hopefully going to be getting my 6th micro-credential soon. I have teachers who are working on their 3rd micro-credential, some that completed 5 micro-credentials, some that are beginning in that process. And the reason that it's an important piece for any high school, but it's important for us at Barrington High School, is that at Barrington High School, we operate through a mission, and our mission is through the vision of the graduate. And when we talk about the vision of the graduate, we talk about all students. What is the vision that we have for all students as they leave our districts? And that includes our multilingual learners. And so in the vision of the graduate, we look at character and citizenship and collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking. And so how we enhance those competencies in our students, especially on multilingual learners, is important. And so it's work that is very, as I said, supported by my district. It's work that is very much passion-based. for the people that are involved, and hopefully will continue to grow in that area. And so as I wanted, as I was preparing for this, I was thinking about what is it that I want all of you to leave here knowing about this this wonderful program, by the way. And as I said, I've done lots of classes. I've been in a lot of campuses. I've learned in many different ways, and this is special. And it's special because as a teacher, I'm learning about strategies, I'm learning about research, I'm learning about pedagogy, but then immediately I'm able to implement it into my classroom with my kids, the faces that I know. And so it is special because I can see, the fruits of my labor. And then as a department in the collaborative piece, when we get together or as a district, really, we get together and talk about this, we all can celebrate and really push each other and support each other in learning a lot more in terms of how do we best support our students. And so, what are the important components of the micro-credentials? I'm going to tell you one little story very quickly. It's one of my little girls that reminds me of me, actually, and she sits right in the front in one of my classes. And we had just introduced language objectives to my class, and we were working on the term claim. And so we do in science a lot of claim evidence and reasoning. And I just had a conversation with her. She's an ML student, first year at Barrington High School, recent student in the United States. She's tested out of the support from the ESL teacher. And so she's being monitored because she speaks well, she writes well enough. And so she has all of these components that allow her to just be monitored and not have to be pulled out of class or have go to her ESL teacher. And she said to me, one of the hardest things is like the word claim, is used in social studies and it's used in science, but I get confused because it's different in these subject areas. And so I had an opportunity to talk to her about, well, maybe it is not that different. Let's look at this. Let's focus on this. And just having that conversation with her where she felt comfortable, right, to talk to me about her language needs in the classroom, all really because of the work that I'm doing with Excel. It's being very explicit, right, in terms of language. And so, she's struggling with this term, but we can then focus in the content area science by using of the language objectives, graphic organizers, vocabulary cards, all of the strategies and support that really has been at the center of all of these micro-credentials that I've completed. And so the support system comes in many different ways, and the explicit teaching of language and content is so powerful in the class that I think, I really do sincerely hope that many more teachers, do this type of program, because it really allows us to be reflective in our practice, to really spend time focusing on these students who are amazing, and who really desperately want us as educators to value their contributions, their experience, their thinking. And so I'm so happy that I met Rini when it's literally a phone call. I just wanted to know about the program. I found it on the state website. And as a result of that, we're continuing to build capacity at Barrington High School, including many more teachers along the way who are going to then know these strategies, know this research, and it's going to benefit not just my students, my classroom, it's going to benefit, in this case, a department, a school, a district. So I hope that, you guys really look into this, because it's different, it's personal, and it really will make a difference for all our students. So thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you, Diana. It's always so nice to hear from you in video and in person, because all of the teachers working in here have such compelling stories too. I want to take I want to address a question in the chat, and which reminds me to point out that NEASC is a partner in this work, and I've known George Edwards and the folks at NEASC for a long time, and we do work together. Someone was asking about international schools. This was a school in particular in Honduras. International schools, if they're accredited by NEASC, certainly, and and otherwise, my only caution is these are the programs funded with federal grant funds. So I would say generally yes. And in a particular case, I'd be happy to follow it down a little bit more. But yeah, otherwise we'd love to support schools anywhere in the world. So I wanted to we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the logistics of participating for folks that are interested. We do have this grant that we're talking about today is a 5-year grant. We have other funding sources. There's also ways to, outside of the grant. I don't know why you would want to go there, but perhaps folks can work directly through the micro-credential platform, which is Bloomboard. The cost outside of the grant is pretty low. So that's there, and happy to answer more about that. But for folks who work within the grant, which anyone that's interested, we do ask participants to make a 2-year commitment to the work. Understand stuff happens. People move, people take leaves, people find out it's just not right for them. They don't have the time for it. You're not committed to paying anything back or anything, but it's a good way for you to think about it if you do want to participate, that it really is a 2-year commitment, to get the most benefits. There are no costs. The tuition and everything is paid. We also stipend everyone, every participant, $250 for each micro-credential they complete. It's a recognition of the additional time that you're putting into this work. For people that want it, we can also offer you a graduate credit, 1 credit for each micro-credential. That's through UCLA. You have to do a little bit more work for it. There's a small paper that you have to write, but it's there. There are some districts who give teachers a tuition salary bump for graduate credits, or if you want it for other reasons, it's there. Not required, but it's there. There's no charge for it, like everything else. And we have been supporting each team with funding to, we call it materials and supplies, funding to, to generally buy stuff that's connected with the work that you're doing. A lot of our teams are using the $3,000 to buy classroom libraries, books, materials that they'll use directly in their classroom or the media center or something. But we've also had teams that have opted to use the funding to go to conferences, to take kids on field trips. So, we're pretty, as long as we're not violating any federal rules, we're really flexible about how you use it. So we've talked a lot about there being a team leader, and that's a really important role. And it also takes some time, sometimes considerable time, particularly in the beginning. And so I wanted to make sure I mentioned that we do stipend the site facilitator. So, that generally comes from someone on your team or at your school, and they work on micro-credentials also, but, they do some of the legwork. They do the setting up meetings, agendas, some of the communication back and forth. you know, that's a lot of teams fall apart because those resources don't exist. So we do stipend that person. We also have a peer network for site facilitators, and we give the site facilitator a mentor. Lots and lots of resources for that person. We also offer during the year design studios, workshops, conferences. Today's conference, we've not only encouraged people to present and write and do these, but we also give you opportunities where we cover the cost to attend conferences. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to wind down, and if there are any other questions, happy to have them either in the chat or I think you can unmute yourself if it's a short question. But otherwise, I'm going to turn things back to George. And thank you.
Thank you, Rini. And thank you to Jason and Andrea and Diana. Any questions for our group before we start to wrap things up? If you have a question, feel free to turn your camera on and unmute yourself. There's the size of our group is sufficient that I think we can do that. Well, not hearing any questions, I want to thank our presenters, Rini, Jason, Andrea, Diana, for sharing this information with us today. What a terrific program, one that I'm sure many of us and many districts could really benefit from. Just a couple of announcements before we end. We're now going to take a 15-minute break before the next set of concurrent sessions start at 10:45. We invite you to use this time to visit our exhibitors in the exhibit hall and the poster sessions hosted by peer educators in the virtual learning fair. Both can be found by using the links in the main menu on the left side of the event window. If you click on the on-demand video link, you will find video presentations from this year's NEASC Awards. We have a number of awards that we give annually, and we have video presentations for each one of those awards. And also, very special, we have a selection of student performances from NEASC member schools. And one of them actually includes one of our former NEASC member school students who has recently been nominated for a Grammy Award. So we really encourage you to check out those student presentations. Speaking of on demand, just a reminder that all of our sessions will be available on demand on the event platform at the end of the conference until January 8th for you to watch on your own time. So if there's another session that you wanted to go to but was happening at the same time, you can go back and you can watch these on-demand videos at any time until January 8th. So with that, we'll close this session. Again, thank you to our presenters and thank you to all of you who attended this session today.